I was 72 years old when my daughter told me I would never see my grandchildren again. She said it calmly, almost politely. It was March 18th, 2025, a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished scrubbing the burnt cheese off a cast iron skillet, the good one from the lodge I bought in 1987 when Laura was still in high school, and thought grilled cheese was haute cuisine. The house smelled faintly of tomato soup and lemon dish soap. My knees ached. The afternoon light filtered through the kitchen blinds in thin, dusty stripes. Ordinary details. That's what I remember most. How painfully ordinary everything felt when she said it. Dad, Laura began over the phone, her voice tight, rehearsed. I think it's better if you don't come by this weekend. Why? I asked. I dried my hands slowly, folded the towel over the oven handle. Ethan has his science fair. I promised him I'd help set up the volcano. There was a pause. Not long, just long enough. Mark and I have decided we need space. Space. A modern word for exile. I live 20 minutes away, I said. I'm not exactly camping in your backyard. Another pause. Then the sentence that rearranged my understanding of fatherhood. If you keep interfering, she said, her voice flattening into something I didn't recognize. You'll never see your grandkids again. Silence. I could hear the faint echo of cartoons in the background. Probably Mia watching something bright and loud. My granddaughter loves purple. Everything in her room is purple curtains comforter. Even the ridiculous $240 ergonomic desk chair I paid for last September. You don't mean that? I said quietly. Oh, I do. And then she hung up. I stood there for a long time, staring at the small digital clock on the microwave point 3:42 p.m. The numbers glowed green and indifferent. You'll never see your grandkids again. It wasn't the cruelty that stunned me. It was the calculation. Because this wasn't about space. It was about money. It always had been. When Laura and Mark bought their house in Brookhaven in 2021, they couldn't qualify for the mortgage alone. The asking price was $650,000. Interest rates were rising. Mark's credit score was 612. Something about business liquidity issues, he said. I paid the down payment. $180,000 transferred on June 4th, 2021, from my Wells Fargo account ending in 8821. I co-signed the mortgage. $470,000 at 3.9% fixed for 30 years. I also wired $48,500 for renovations that August, kitchen cabinets, quartz countertops, those absurd pendant lights Laura saw on Instagram. Dad, it's an investment, she'd said, hugging me in the half-finished kitchen, drywall dust in her hair. You'll basically be building equity with us. Equity. By December 2024, I had transferred an additional $126,300 to their joint account for temporary cash flow issues. Private school tuition for Ethan and Mia, $38,000 per year. I covered half. Summer camp, $7,200. Orthodontics, $6,800. I never kept score out loud, but I kept receipts. Old contractors develop that habit. When you've run a construction company for 40 years, you learn to document everything. Every invoice, every nail. I retired in 2018 after selling Harlan & Sons Construction for $2.4 million. After taxes, I cleared just under $1.7 million. Sensible investments, municipal bonds, dividend stocks, a paid-off house. I was comfortable, not extravagant. I still buy store-brand cereal and fix my own plumbing. But I love those children, and love makes accountants out of fools. The first hint came in January. I stopped by unannounced, a mistake apparently, with a box of clementines and a new chess set for Ethan. He's 10 now, sharp mind, quick hands. Mark opened the door, not smiling. Hey, he said, blocking the entry slightly with his shoulder. Brought fruit, I said lightly, and something for Ethan. Laura appeared behind him, her smile thin as printer paper. We talked about calling first, she said. I was in the neighborhood. You live in the neighborhood, Mark muttered. I laughed. They didn't. Inside, the house felt different, tighter, the air thick with some unspoken arrangement I hadn't signed. Ethan ran down the stairs when he saw me. Grandpa, he shouted. Laura's hand landed on his shoulder mid-stride. Homework first, she said sharply. He looked confused. So did I. That night, I reviewed my bank statements at the kitchen table, under the warm yellow light of the same lamp my wife bought in 1992. Margaret always said light should be soft, not interrogative. I prefer interrogative now. January 12th, $12,000 transfer. January 26th, $8,500 transfer. February 3rd, $15,000. Urgent contractor payment. Except I know contractors, and no reputable contractor demands full payment before starting drywall. I called the bank the next morning. Mr. Harlan, the representative said pleasantly, those transfers were initiated through the Shared Family Access Authorization. Shared. In 2022, after minor surgery, I had added Laura as an authorized user in case of emergencies. Emergencies have a flexible definition. I asked for detailed logs. They emailed them within the hour. IP addresses, timestamps, device IDs, all initiated from Laura's home office desktop. The next Sunday, I didn't call before coming over. I brought nothing. Laura met me at the door. You can't just show up, she said. I'd like to see my grandchildren. Mark appeared behind her again, always behind her. You're causing tension, he said. The kids feel it. I almost laughed. The kids feel what you teach them to feel. Laura's eyes hardened. Dad, we're serious. If you keep undermining us, questioning our finances, making us feel guilty, we will cut contact. There it was again. Cleaner this time. Sharper. You'll never see your grandkids again. She didn't shout it. She placed it between us like a signed contract. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, not in rage, in clarity, because threats are useful things. They reveal leverage. And if she believed the children were leverage, she had forgotten who held the mortgage. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. The morning after the second threat, I made oatmeal. Not the instant kind Laura buys in pastel packets with words like ancient grains printed across them. Real oatmeal, steel cut, 25 minutes on low heat, a pinch of salt, a sliced apple softening slowly in the steam. Routine is an anchor. You learn that after burying a wife. Margaret used to say that anger should never be your first reaction. Paper first? She'd tell me when a subcontractor tried to inflate an invoice. Then speak. So I ate my oatmeal. I washed the bowl. I sat at the oak desk in my study. The same desk where I signed payroll checks for 43 employees for almost 3 decades. And I began printing. March 18th call log. 3 to 41 p.m. Duration. 2 minutes 12 seconds. January through March transfers. $47,500 total. I arranged the pages in chronological order. Stapled each month separately. Label them in neat block letters. When you're 72, people assume you're sentimental. They forget you can also be methodical. At 10:30 a.m., I called Wells Fargo again. I'd like to revoke authorized access for Laura Bennett effective immediately. There was a pause on the line. Is everything all right, Mr. Harlan? No, I said calmly, but it will be. I confirmed my identity, answered security questions Laura would not know. The name of my first dog, Bruno. The model of my first truck, 1978 Ford F-150, blue, rusted tailgate. The representative processed the request. Access has been removed as of 10:47 a.m., she said. Thank you. And I asked for something else. I'd like to freeze outgoing transfers over $5,000 without in-person authorization. Of course. 2 clicks. A pause. Done. It felt oddly similar to changing locks. By noon, my phone was vibrating across the desk. Laura. I let it ring twice before answering. What did you do? She demanded. Her composure had evaporated. I made adjustments to my accounts. You froze the transfers. Yes. You can't just... She stopped herself. Reset. Dad, we have payments pending. I'm aware. Mark's supplier is expecting $18,000 by Friday. Then Mark should have $18,000. Silence. Breathing. The faint hum of her office printer in the background. You're punishing us. No, I said evenly. I'm auditing. You promised to help. I have helped. You're being vindictive. There it was. The moral inversion. I'm being careful. Her tone shifted. Less anger now, more strategy. Dad, you know the kids are sensitive. They don't understand tension. If this continues, it won't be healthy for them to see you. A softer version of the same weapon. You mean you'll withhold them? I'm protecting them. From what? From instability. I looked around my quiet study. Paid off in 2004. No debt. No late notices. No supplier breathing down my neck. Instability, I repeated, almost myself. We'll talk later, she said quickly. When you've calmed down. And she hung up. I didn't calm down. I called someone else. Richard Feldman, estate attorney. We've played golf together twice a year since 1999. He once told me the most dangerous phrase in family law is informal understanding. He answered on the second ring. Tom, to what do I owe the pleasure? I need a formal review of every document I've signed since 2021. A pause. That doesn't sound like pleasure. It isn't. I outlined the mortgage co-signing, the authorized bank access, the informal repayment agreements, verbal of course, the steady escalation of dependency. Richard didn't interrupt. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. Do you have copies of everything? I have copies of things they've forgotten exist. Good. We scheduled a meeting for Thursday at 9:00 a.m. His office downtown, Walnut Street, 3rd floor, corner suite overlooking the courthouse. Symbolic, perhaps. That evening, I drove past Laura's house. I didn't stop. The porch lights were on. Through the front window, I could see Ethan at the dining table. Had bent over homework. Mia sprawled on the floor with crayons. Mark stood in the kitchen. Phone pressed his ear, pacing. I recognized the posture. Desperation disguised as negotiation. I had stood like that once in 1987, when a supplier threatened to halt lumber deliveries mid-project. I'd learned then that leverage belongs to the one who can survive longer without the deal. I drove home without turning into the driveway. Thursday morning, Richard reviewed everything. He wore the same charcoal suit he always wears, cuffs precisely half an inch visible. You still own 50% of the Brookhaven property, he said, scanning the mortgage documents. Your name is on the deed as joint tenant with right of survivorship. I remember. They cannot refinance without your signature. I suspected. He flipped to the bank authorization forms. This, he tapped the page, was overly generous. I was recovering from anesthesia. You were trusting. He leaned back in his chair. Have they threatened to restrict access to your grandchildren? Yes. Documented? Not yet. Richard steepled his fingers. Family courts take a dim view of coercion tied to financial control. I don't want court, I said quietly. Then what do you want? I looked at the courthouse through his window. I want them to understand that love is not a line of credit. He almost smiled. Then you need leverage. I thought I had it. You do, he said. You just haven't used it. He outlined options in calm clinical language. Formal demand letter requiring accounting of transferred funds. Notice of intent to petition property if financial misrepresentation is proven. Petition for grandparent visitation rights under state statute, particularly if denial is retaliatory. I listened. When you're young, legal terminology sounds aggressive. At 72, it sounds protective. Draft the letter, I said. All three. Start with the accounting demand. He nodded. Understood. By Saturday morning, Laura called again. Her voice was different, measured, cool. Dad, we received something from Richard Feldman. I expected you would. You're involving lawyers now? You involve threats. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? A long silence. You are embarrassing us. No, I said quietly. You embarrassed yourselves. She inhaled sharply. Mark says if you push this, we'll refinance and buy you out. With what credit score? Silence again. He must have been standing nearby. You think you're untouchable, she said softly. I think I'm documented. I could hear the children laughing somewhere behind her. The sound cut deeper than her words. Dad, she said, one final attempt at softness. Why are you doing this? I looked down at the neat stacks of paper on my desk, at the numbers, the dates, the signatures. Because you told me I'd never see my grandkids again, I said. And I realized you believed that. And I spent my entire life building things that last. I let the silence stretch. You built this house with my help, she said bitterly. Yes, I replied, and I can dismantle it with the same precision. She hung up first this time. Outside, the early spring wind rattled the magnolia branches against my study window. For the first time since March 18th, I didn't feel hurt. I felt steady, because love may be unconditional, but access is contractual, and I had just begun reading the fine print. The letter went out on March 27th. Certified mail. Signature, required. Richard insisted on that detail. Papers should arrive with weight, he said, sliding the envelope across his polished desk. And sometimes weight is measured in green postal slips. The demand was precise. Full accounting of all transfers totaling $173,800 between June 2021 and March 2025. Documentation of how funds were used. Clarification of any outstanding debts or liabilities attached to the Brookhaven property. Response required within 10 business days. No threats. No raised voice. Just paper. On April 1st at 8:12 p.m., Mark showed up at my door. He did not call first. I was in the kitchen searing salmon in a cast iron pan. The same one from the day of the first threat. Butter foamed around the edges. Lemon zest waited on the cutting board. The doorbell rang once. Then again. I wiped my hands and opened the door. Mark looked different without Laura beside him. Less armored. His tie was loosened. Shirt collar wilted. You blindsided us, he said, stepping inside without invitation. I believe I sent notice. This is family, Tom. You don't stick attorneys on family. I don't threaten family with exile. His jaw tightened. You're overreacting. Am I? He paced the living room, glancing at the framed photos of Margaret. At the old oak floors I refinished myself in 1995. You froze transfers. Suppliers are calling me. One of them threatened to lien the house. The house I co-own. He stopped pacing. This is temporary liquidity strain. Then produce the accounting. It's complicated. It's numbers. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. You wouldn't understand modern business flow. I almost smiled. I built a company from a pickup truck and a rented trailer. I understand cash flow better than you understand leverage. Silence. He shifted tactics. Look, he said, lowering his voice. Laura didn't mean what she said. She repeated it. She was emotional. No, I said quietly. She was strategic. He exhaled sharply. You're hurting the kids. No, I corrected. Your debt is hurting the kids. That landed. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not anger. Fear. How much? I asked. He didn't answer. How much, Mark? He stared at the floor. About 300, he muttered. 300,000? He nodded once. Unsecured business loans. High-interest lines of credit. A bridge investment that never bridged anything. And you were using my transfers to service the interest, I said. He didn't deny it. Did Laura know? Another pause. She knows now. Of course she does. And when the money slowed, I continued, the pressure increased. That's not fair. No, I said. It isn't. He looked up then. Frustration cracking into something uglier. You think you're the victim? You sit in this paid-off house with your investment portfolio while we're drowning. You could fix this with one wire transfer. I let the words hang. And what would I get in return? He blinked. Your family. My family is not collateral. He stepped closer. You'll lose them. Theirs again, I said softly. He stopped. You really think a judge is going to side with you if this turns ugly? He pressed. Courts don't like meddling grandparents. I'm not meddling, I said. I'm documenting coercion. He stared at me. You recorded it? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because on March 22nd, 4 days after the first threat, I had done something I'd never imagined doing to my own daughter. I installed the call recording app on my landline. On March 24th, she repeated the sentence. If you don't stop questioning us, you'll never see the kids again. Clear. Calm. Audible. Mark's face paled. You wouldn't use that. I hope I don't have to. He sank into the armchair across from me, Margaret's chair. The springs creaked under his weight. What do you want? He asked finally. I want transparency. You'll get spreadsheets. I want repayment terms. He swallowed. And I want an acknowledgement in writing that access to my grandchildren will never be contingent on financial compliance. That's extreme. No, I said, that's basic. The salmon began to smoke slightly in the kitchen. I turned off the burner. When I came back, he was still sitting there, staring at the framed photo of Ethan at age 5, missing front teeth, grinning beside the half-built treehouse I constructed in their yard. You love them, he said quietly. Yes. And you'd really risk court? I'd risk anything to prevent being blackmailed with them. The word blackmailed seemed to settle into the room like dust. He stood slowly. If this goes public, it'll destroy Laura. She made the choice public the moment she weaponized her children. He moved toward the door. We'll respond to the letter, he said stiffly. I'll expect it by April 10th. At the threshold, he hesitated. You think you're teaching us a lesson, he said. No, I replied. I'm enforcing one. The door closed behind him. 2 days later, Richard called. They retained counsel. I assumed they would. There's more. I waited. Mark's company filed notice of potential insolvency last quarter. I closed my eyes. How bad? Bad enough that creditors may pursue personal guarantees. The house? Yes. I walked to the window. Outside, the magnolia branches swayed. White blossoms beginning to open against the gray April sky. They were going to refinance, I said slowly. Pull equity. Use my credit. That would require your signature. And if I refused, they'd pressure you. I almost laughed. They already tried. Richard's voice softened. Tom, this is moving toward litigation. I know. You prepared? I thought of Ethan's volcano project, of Mia's purple room, of the way Laura once clutched my hand crossing the street when she was 6. No parent is prepared for this, I said. But I am prepared to finish it. Because the truth had settled cleanly now. This was never about space. It was about leverage. And for the first time since March 18th, I understood something clearly. They believed they could outlast me. They forgot I built my life pouring concrete in winter. I know how to wait while something hardens. And I know exactly when it's strong enough to bear weight. The petition was filed on April 18th. Harlan versus Bennett. I stared at the caption longer than I cared to admit. Your name against your daughters looks unnatural in black ink, like an error in printing, like something that should be corrected with whiteout and apology. Richard didn't offer sympathy. He offered structure. We're filing for declaratory relief regarding financial coercion and petitioning for grandparent visitation under Statute 14-10-123, he said, sliding the folder toward me. Given documented threats tied to monetary compliance, we have standing. Standing. At 72, that word carries irony. The first hearing was set for May 6 th.9:30 a.m. Courtroom 4B. I wore the same navy suit I had worn to Margaret's funeral, pressed, but slightly loose at the waist now. Grief takes appetite. So does betrayal. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Laura stood 20 feet away near the double doors, arms folded. Mark beside her whispering. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe the distance did that. When her eyes met mine, something flashed there. Not hatred. Defensiveness. As if I had forced her into this. Richard adjusted his glasses. Remember, he said quietly, we are not attacking. We are establishing facts. Facts. They've been my refuge all month. Inside the courtroom. The benches were half full. Custody cases, property disputes, the quiet unraveling of domestic promises. Judge Eleanor Whitman presided. Late 60s. Silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Sharp eyes that missed very little. She read through the initial filings without expression. Mr. Harlan, she began. You are petitioning for formalized visitation rights based on alleged financial coercion. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you assert that access to your grandchildren was threatened contingent upon continued financial support. Yes. She turned to Laura's attorney, a young man with hair too carefully styled. Counsel? Your Honor, my clients deny coercion. They simply requested boundaries. Mr. Harlan's financial involvement has been disruptive. Disruptive. An interesting word for $173,800. Judge Whitman looked back at me. Mr. Harlan. Do you have documentation? Richard handed up a binder. Tabs labeled by month. Transfers highlighted. Call transcripts attached. The judge flipped slowly. Then she paused. Is this transcript accurate? She asked. Yes, Your Honor. Laura shifted in her seat. The judge read aloud. If you don't stop questioning us, you'll never see the kids again. The words echoed in the room, stripped of tone, stripped of family context. Just language. Laura's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, that statement was made in emotional distress. Was it made? The judge interrupted calmly. Laura swallowed. Yes, she said softly. The air shifted. Judge Whitman leaned back. Ms. Bennett, Do you believe a child's relationship with a grandparent should be contingent upon financial compliance? Laura hesitated. No. Then why was it framed that way? Silence. Mark leaned toward her, whispering urgently. The judge noticed. Mr. Bennett, you will have your opportunity. For now, I'm addressing your wife. Laura's composure cracked slightly. We were under pressure, she said. Mark's business. Your financial strain does not justify coercive language involving minors, the judge said firmly. There it was, a boundary drawn not by me, but by someone immune to guilt. Mark was called next, under oath. His voice lost its edge. Yes, we have liquidity issues. Yes, Mr. Harlan provided substantial financial assistance. Yes, the transfers were used to service business obligations. And did you communicate repayment terms? Richard asked. No. Did you inform Mr. Harlan of total outstanding business, debt exceeding $300,000? No. And when financial support slowed? Mark hesitated. We were stressed. Richard didn't smile. And you believed restricting grandparent access would alleviate that stress? No. Yet the threat was made. Mark's jaw tightened. Yes. Judge Whitman closed the binder. Her expression had shifted. No longer neutral. Measured. Financial dependency does not entitle one to emotional leverage, she said quietly. And children are not instruments of negotiation. The words settled like a gavel before the gavel fell. Laura's attorney attempted one final pivot. Your Honor, even if intemperate words were used, court intervention risks destabilizing the family further. Judge Whitman removed her glasses. The destabilization occurred when financial support became conflated with relational access. She looked directly at Laura. Ms. Bennett, you are fortunate your father sought judicial clarity rather than withdrawing entirely. Laura's eyes filled, but she did not cry. Tears in court are complicated things. They rarely change facts. The ruling was delivered verbally. Formal visitation schedule established. Alternating Sundays, 2 holidays per year, weekly video calls. Prohibition against conditioning contact on financial contribution. Recommendation, not order. For mediation regarding financial entanglement and property interest. Mr. Harlan, the judge said finally, you co-own the Brookhaven property. That is a civil matter beyond today's scope, but I strongly advise clarity moving forward. Yes, Your Honor. She paused. Grandchildren benefit from stable, loving adults. All of you would do well to remember that. The gavel struck once. Clean. Final. Outside the courtroom, Laura approached me. Her eyes were red now. You humiliated us, she said. I documented you. You recorded me. You threatened me. Mark stood slightly behind her again. You could have just talked to us, he said bitterly. I did. Laura's voice dropped. Are you satisfied? I looked at her, at the woman who once clung to my leg on her first day of kindergarten. No, I said quietly, but I'm protected. She flinched at that word. Protection sounds cold until you need it. As I stepped out into the late morning sun, something unexpected settled inside me. Not triumph, relief, because the threat had been tested in open air, and it had collapsed. For weeks, the sentence had echoed in my head like a verdict. You'll never see your grandkids again. But in courtroom 4B, under fluorescent lights and legal language, that sentence had been reduced to what it always was, a tactic. And tactics do not survive scrutiny. They survive silence. I walked down the courthouse steps slowly, knees aching slightly, suit collar warm in the spring sun. For the first time in months, I felt something steady beneath my feet. Not anger, not revenge, authority. And somewhere, I imagined Judge Whitman's pen scratching across her docket sheet, closing the entry. The law had spoken, but the reckoning, the real one, was only beginning. The first Sunday under the court, order felt unnatural. Scheduled affection has a bureaucratic smell to it. I arrived at 10:00 aim sharp. Not early, not late. The printed visitation agreement sat in the glove compartment of my car, though I doubted I would need to produce it like some laminated passport to my own blood. Laura opened the door. No folded arms this time. No sharp posture. Hi, she said. Hi. The house looked the same. Quartz countertops I paid for, pendant lights that still hung slightly crooked if you knew where to look. But the air had changed. Less defiance. More caution. Ethan appeared first. Grandpa. No restraint this time. No hand on his shoulder. He hugged me the way children do when they haven't yet learned how to ration loyalty. Mia followed, purple socks mismatched, holding a drawing. I made this, she said, thrusting it into my hands. It was at the volcano. Red crayon lava. Stick figures at the bottom. 3 of them. Who's that? I asked gently, pointing. You, she said matter-of-factly. You forgot to come to the science fair. I glanced at Laura. She looked away. I didn't forget, I said quietly. I wasn't allowed. Ethan frowned slightly, processing. Children notice more than we think. We built the volcano in the backyard that afternoon. Baking soda, vinegar, red food coloring. A mess that would irritate Laura later when it stained the grass. The eruption was theatrical. Ethan laughed so hard he fell backward into the clover. For a moment, the legal language evaporated. There was only noise, sunlight, the simple geometry of a grandfather kneeling beside his grandson. Love without invoice. 2 weeks later, mediation began. Neutral conference room, long oak table, bottled water sweating onto paper coasters. Mark presented spreadsheets, this time, real ones, business losses, loan balances, credit card interest rates north of 22%. I made mistakes, he said stiffly. Yes, I replied. Laura didn't look at me. We thought we could grow faster, she said. We thought you had capacity. Capacity. I folded my hands. I had generosity, I said. You mistook it for obligation. The mediator, a woman in her 50s with sharp reading glasses, nodded slowly. Let's separate emotional injury from financial structure, she said. Practical woman. I liked her immediately. We reached terms after 3 sessions. Formal repayment plan for $120,000 of discretionary transfers over 5 years at 2% interest. Symbolic, not punitive at end, further financial support without written agreement. Agreement to sell Mark's minority stake in his failing venture to reduce personal liability. Refinancing discussion postponed until Mark's credit improves, without my obligation to co-sign further debt. It wasn't blood, it was structure. And structure is what prevents collapse. The real reckoning came in July. Creditors moved faster than Mark anticipated. One supplier filed notice of intent to pursue personal assets tied to business guarantees. The Brookhaven house, our house, appeared in preliminary filings. Laura called me that evening. Not sharp, not strategic, afraid. They're saying the house could be at risk. I warned you, I said quietly. Can you do something? There it was, the old reflex, the wire transfer solution. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at Margaret's photograph. What are you asking? I said, to help us cover the settlement. How much? $75,000. I breathed slowly. You signed a repayment agreement in May. I know. You signed a mediation statement acknowledging coercive language. Yes. And now you're asking for more unsecured support. She didn't answer, because now she understood something she hadn't in March. The court order protected visitation, not her finances. I will not fund avoidance, I said evenly. So you let us lose the house? I will protect my half of it. Silence. Then something shifted in her voice. What does that mean? It means, I said, if insolvency forces sale, I will exercise my right to petition. Her breath caught. You'd force a sale? I would preserve equity. You'd uproot the kids? I didn't take out $300,000 in unsecured loans. The truth has edges. She began to cry then, not theatrically, quietly. I didn't think it would go this far. I know, and I did, because entitlement rarely predicts consequences. The sale happened in September, not foreclosure, not public auction, negotiated. $710,000, final price. The market had climbed slightly. After mortgage balance and fees, equity remained. My share, just under $190,000, transferred cleanly into my account on September 28th at 2:14 p.m. Documented. Laura and Mark moved into a smaller rental 20 minutes north. 3 bedrooms. No pendant lights. No quartz. More honest proportions. The following Sunday, Ethan asked me something while we were assembling a bookshelf in my study. Grandpa, he said carefully, tightening screw. Why did we have to move? I looked at him. Because sometimes adults build things too fast, I said, and they forget to check the foundation. He nodded slowly, as if that made sense. It did. Laura has softened. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but the sharpness is gone. In its place is something more fragile. Accountability. She calls before asking for advice now. She sends copies of school reports. She even mailed me a handwritten note in October. I'm sorry I said that. I was scared. It wasn't eloquent. It was enough. Last week, during one of our scheduled Sundays, Mia crawled into my lap while we watched an old black and white movie Margaret loved. Mom says the judge helped us, she said. I smiled faintly. The judge had a different opinion, I replied. She didn't understand. She didn't need to, because what the judge really did wasn't punish. She drew a line between love and leverage, between generosity and obligation, between family and transaction. And in doing so, she dismantled a sentence that had haunted me for months. You'll never see your grandkids again. Turns out, that opinion didn't belong to my daughter. It belonged to someone who mistook access for power. And power, like unsecured debt, collapses when examined under light. I built my life pouring foundations that lasted 50 years. This time, I poured one in a courtroom, and it will hold.